The grand concert hall in Vienna was something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and the walls were covered in gold designs that caught the afternoon light. Rows of velvet seats faced a massive stage where a beautiful black piano sat waiting. The air smelled like old wood and expensive perfume, the kind of place where history seemed to live in every corner. 30 students had traveled from all over Europe for this moment. They sat in those plush seats, their hearts racing with a mix of excitement and terror. This wasn't just any piano class. This was a master class with Victor Ashford, one of the most famous pianists in the world. His concerts sold out months in advance. His recordings had won every award imaginable, and his opinion could make or break a young musician's career. Victor walked onto the stage like he owned it, which in a way he did. He was tall and slim, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and he moved with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of standing ovations. When he sat at the piano and played a quick piece by Chopin, his fingers danced across the keys so fast they almost blurred. The students erupted in applause, already intimidated. Among those students sat a 15-year-old girl named Lily Way. She was small for her age, with long black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a modest blue dress that her mother had helped her pick out that morning. In her right hand she held a white cane, folded neatly across her lap. Dark glasses covered her eyes, hiding the fact that she couldn't see a single thing around her. Not the chandeliers, not the golden walls, not even the legendary pianist sitting just 30 feet away. Lily had lost her sight in a car accident when she was 7 years old. One moment she was drawing pictures of flowers in the back seat, and the next everything went dark forever. The doctors had done everything they could, but some injuries don't heal. Her parents had cried for weeks. Lily had cried for months. But eventually she learned to live in a world of sounds, smells, and touches instead of colors and faces. Victor began calling students up one by one to introduce themselves and play a short piece. Each student would walk nervously to the stage, say their name and where they were from, then sit at that magnificent piano and try not to shake too much while they played. Some were good, some were okay, and Victor commented on each performance with the kind of brutal honesty that only the truly talented can get away with. When it was Lily's turn, her teacher, Mrs. Hoffman, gently touched her shoulder. Lily stood up, unfolded her white cane, and began the careful walk toward the stage. The click-click-click of her cane against the wooden floor seemed impossibly loud in the quiet hall. She counted her steps like she always did, relying on the mental map she'd created from the brief tour that morning. She made it to the stairs at the side of the stage, climbed them carefully, and walked to the center. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could hear the shuffle of people adjusting in their seats, the whisper of fabric against fabric. Someone coughed. She faced where she thought the audience was and spoke clearly. "Hello, my name is Lily Way. I'm 15 years old, and I'm from Salzburg, Austria." There was a pause, and then Victor's voice cut through the silence. It wasn't warm anymore. It had an edge to it, sharp like broken glass. "You're blind," it wasn't a question. It was an observation, stated in a tone that made it sound like an accusation. Lily felt her stomach twist. "Yes, sir. Since I was 7, another pause. Lily heard Victor stand up from wherever he'd been sitting. His expensive shoes clicked against the stage floor as he walked closer to her. She could smell his cologne now, something woody and strong. "Tell me something," Victor said, his voice echoing in the hall. "How can you truly play piano if you cannot see the keys?" Piano is a visual art as much as it is auditory. The great pianists watch their hands. They study the sheet music with their eyes. They see the connection between their fingers and the sounds they create. Lily's face grew hot. Her hand, still holding her cane, began to tremble slightly. "I've learned to play by touch and by ear, sir. I've been playing since I was 3 years old." 3 years old, Victor repeated, and Lily could hear the doubt dripping from his words. "Before you lost your sight, then? So you have memories of seeing the piano, but you cannot see it now. How can you possibly understand the full scope of what you're doing?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lily heard whispers from the other students. Some sounded uncomfortable, others curious. She wished she could see their faces, read their expressions, know if anyone was on her side. "I understand through feeling the keys and hearing the music, sir," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My teacher says that sometimes seeing can actually be a distraction from truly listening." Victor made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a scoff. Lily couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty made everything worse. Your teacher sounds very optimistic, Victor said slowly, but we must be realistic about limitations. Piano requires precision. It requires seeing the distance between keys, watching your hand positions, reading complex musical scores. These are not things that can be adequately replaced by touch alone. Lily wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him about the thousands of hours she'd spent practicing, about the way she'd memorized entire concertos note by note, about how her fingers knew the piano better than most people knew their own names. But the words stuck in her throat. This was Victor Ashford. Who was she to argue with him? I'd like to assign you a piece, Victor continued. Something appropriate for your situation. Do you know Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? The whispers grew louder. Someone gasped. Lily felt like she'd been slapped. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star was what you gave to 5-year-olds in their first month of lessons. It was what her baby cousin played at family gatherings. Sir, I know more advanced pieces. I could play something by Chopin or… Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Victor interrupted smoothly. We must walk before we run. Or in your case, perhaps we must crawl before we walk. I'm sure you understand. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Learn it well, and perhaps tomorrow you can play it for us. He turned away from her then, dismissing her as if she were already gone. Lily stood frozen on the stage for a moment, humiliation burning through every inch of her body. The other students were getting assignments too. She heard him tell a boy from France to prepare a complex Liszt piece. He told a girl from Germany to work on Beethoven. Real music, challenging music, music that required actual skill. Mrs. Hoffman appeared at Lily's side, took her arm gently and guided her back down the stairs and to their seats. Lily sat down heavily, her hands gripping her cane so tightly her knuckles hurt. Tears pressed against the backs of her dark glasses, threatening to spill over. She bit her lip hard to keep them from falling. Around her, the master class continued. Other students played. Victor commented, sometimes kindly, sometimes harshly, but always with a certain respect for their abilities. Lily barely heard any of it. In her mind, she replayed Victor's words over and over. How can you truly play piano if you cannot see the keys? But underneath the humiliation, underneath the tears she refused to let fall, something else was growing, something hot and fierce and determined. Victor Ashford thought she couldn't really play piano. He thought blindness made her less capable, less worthy of real music. He'd assigned her a children's song like she was a child herself. Lily's grip on her cane shifted. Her jaw set. Her tears dried before they could fall. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would show him exactly what a blind girl could do. The ride back to their small hotel was quiet. Mrs. Hoffman didn't say much, just kept her hand on Lily's shoulder as they walked through the Vienna streets. Lily could hear the city around her. Car horns, bicycle bells, people laughing at outdoor cafes. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been completely humiliated in front of 30 people and one of the most famous pianists alive. When they got to their room, Lily sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks while Mrs. Hoffman made tea in the tiny electric kettle on the dresser. He doesn't know, Mrs. Hoffman said softly, bringing Lily a warm cup. He doesn't know who you really are. Lily wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling its heat. Maybe he's right. Maybe I can't really play properly because I can't see. Stop that right now, Mrs. Hoffman said, her voice suddenly sharp. The old woman sat down next to Lily with a heavy sigh. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Are you listening? Yes, ma'am. Victor Ashford is a brilliant pianist. No one can deny that. But brilliance doesn't make someone right about everything, and it certainly doesn't give him the right to judge what you're capable of without ever hearing you play. Lily sipped her tea. It was too hot and burned her tongue a little, but she didn't care. What Mrs. Hoffman didn't say out loud, what she'd never really told Lily in clear words, was just how extraordinary her student actually was. Most teachers would call their best students talented or gifted. Mrs. Hoffman had taught piano for 47 years. She'd seen hundreds of students pass through her studio. And in all that time, she'd never encountered anyone like Lily Way. The truth was that Lily had been playing piano since before she could read. Her parents discovered her gift by accident when she was just 3 years old. They'd taken her to visit a friend who had an old upright piano in their living room. While the adults talked over coffee, little Lily had wandered over to the instrument and climbed onto the bench. Her tiny fingers had pressed random keys at first, just experimenting. But then she'd played something back that she'd heard on the radio that morning. Note for note. Perfect pitch. Perfect rhythm. No one had taught her. She'd just heard it and knew how to recreate it. Her parents had enrolled her in lessons immediately. By age 5, she was playing pieces meant for teenagers. By age 6, her teacher had run out of things to teach her and passed her on to Mrs. Hoffman, who'd been a concert pianist herself before arthritis ended her performing career. Then came the accident. Lily was 7, sitting in the back seat on the way home from a recital where she'd played Mozart. A drunk driver ran a red light. The impact sent their car spinning into a pole. Lily's parents walked away with bruises. But Lily had hit her head in just the wrong way. The doctor said something about optic nerve damage, used words like irreversible and permanent. The light went out of her world and never came back. Everyone thought that would be the end of her piano career. How could a blind 7-year-old possibly continue? But Lily had surprised them all. Without sight, something shifted in her brain. Her hearing became sharper, more precise. Her sense of touch grew more sensitive. And her memory, already impressive, became almost supernatural. Mrs. Hoffman had worked with her carefully, patiently. They'd developed techniques. Lily learned to memorize pieces by listening to recordings over and over, sometimes hundreds of times. She'd break down complex compositions into tiny sections, learning each hand separately then together. Her fingers learned the geography of the piano so well that she could leap across 2 octaves without a moment's hesitation. By age 10, she was playing Chopin's most difficult etudes. By 12, she'd mastered Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, all 3 movements. By 14, she could play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, a piece so technically demanding that many professional pianists never attempted it. But Mrs. Hoffman had kept Lily's gift quiet. She didn't want her student to become some curiosity, some blind girl that people came to see out of pity or shock, rather than genuine appreciation for her artistry. They'd entered a few small competitions, won some prizes, but nothing major. Nothing that would attract too much attention. Mrs. Hoffman wanted Lily to develop her skill without the pressure of fame, without the weight of being labeled a prodigy or a miracle. Now, sitting in the small hotel room in Vienna, Mrs. Hoffman wondered if she'd made a mistake. Maybe if she'd let Lily perform more publicly, if she'd built up her reputation, Victor Ashford would have heard of her. Maybe then he wouldn't have dismissed her so cruelly. "I want to show him," Lily said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Tomorrow. I want to play something real." "The Rachmaninoff?" Mrs. Hoffman asked. Yes, Mrs. Hoffman considered this carefully. The Rachmaninoff was Lily's masterpiece, the piece she'd spent 2 years perfecting. But it was also incredibly long and complex. Would Victor even let her play something like that? Would he interrupt her after 30 seconds and tell her to stop? "He might not let you," Mrs. Hoffman warned. "Then I'll make him let me," Lily said. And there was steel in her voice that Mrs. Hoffman had never heard before. They spent the evening in the hotel's small practice room, a cramped space with an old upright piano that was slightly out of tune. Lily didn't play the Rachmaninoff. She didn't need to practice it anymore. Instead, she played through some of her favorite pieces, letting the music calm her nerves and remind her why she loved piano in the first place. Around 9 o'clock, her phone buzzed. It was a text from another student at the master class, a girl named Chen, who'd sat 2 rows behind Lily that afternoon. They'd exchanged numbers during the lunch break. "Hey, I just wanted to say that what Victor did today was wrong. Everyone's talking about it. A bunch of us think you should get a real chance to play tomorrow. You should demand it." Lily smiled a little. At least some people were on her side. That night, she barely slept. She lay in the dark hotel room, which looked the same to her as a brightly lit room would, and ran through the Rachmaninoff in her mind. Her fingers twitched slightly under the covers, pressing invisible keys. She heard every note in her head, felt every chord change, knew every crescendo and diminuendo. People thought being blind was her weakness. They thought it limited her, held her back, made her less capable than other pianists. But Lily knew something they didn't. Being blind meant she'd learned to truly listen, not just to hear, but to listen with every cell in her body. She didn't just play music. She lived inside it. She breathed it. She became it. When other pianists played, they watched their hands. They relied on their eyes to tell them where to go next. But Lily had no choice but to feel the music in her bones, to trust her hands completely, to surrender herself entirely to the sound. It made her playing different, deeper, more emotional. Victor Ashford thought sight was necessary for great piano playing. Tomorrow she would prove him wrong. The next morning Lily woke before her alarm. She took a long shower, let Mrs. Hoffman help her pick out a nicer dress, ate breakfast even though her stomach was in knots. They arrived at the concert hall an hour early. Other students were already there, warming up in practice rooms, talking nervously in the hallways. When Lily walked in with her white cane, several students came up to her. Chen was there along with 3 others. They formed a small circle around her. "We talked last night," Chen said. "When Victor calls on you today, you should ask to play something else. Something that shows what you can really do. And if he says no, we'll back you up." All of us. Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. These students, most of whom she'd never met before yesterday, were willing to stand with her against one of the most powerful figures in classical music. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means everything." The master class was about to begin. Students filed into their seats. Victor Ashford walked onto the stage, looking as polished and perfect as he had the day before. He smiled at the audience, made a small joke that everyone laughed at, and then announced they'd start by having a few students play their assigned pieces from yesterday. Lily sat in her seat, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were sweating. Her mouth was dry. But underneath all that nervousness was something unshakable. She was ready. And Victor Ashford had no idea what was about to hit him. Victor started the second day of masterclass by calling up a boy from Italy who'd been assigned a Chopin nocturne. The boy played well, his fingers moving smoothly across the keys, and Victor nodded approvingly throughout. When he finished, Victor gave him detailed feedback about dynamics and phrasing, the kind of attention that made it clear he saw potential in the student. Next was a girl from Sweden who played Debussy. Then a boy from Spain with Mozart. Each performance lasted about 10 minutes, followed by Victor's commentary. Lily sat through it all, her hands folded in her lap, her white cane resting against her leg. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, after the 5th student had played, Victor looked down at his list and called out, "Lily Way." The room went quiet. Lily stood up, unfolded her cane, and began the walk to the stage. But this time, the click of her cane against the floor didn't sound like weakness to her. It sounded like a countdown, like a warning. Mrs. Hoffman gave her hand a quick squeeze as she passed. Chen whispered, "You've got this." Lily climbed the stairs carefully, walked to the center of the stage, and stopped. She didn't sit at the piano yet. She stood there, facing the audience she couldn't see, and took a deep breath. "Mr. Ashford," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I'd like to request permission to play a different piece than the one you assigned me." There was a pause. Lily heard Victor shift in his seat. "The assignment was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," he said, and there was amusement in his voice, like she was a child asking to stay up past bedtime. "Did you find it too challenging?" A few people laughed nervously. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "No, sir, I found it too simple. I'd like to play something that better demonstrates my actual ability." The laughter stopped. The room got very quiet. Lily could almost feel Victor's expression changing, could imagine him sitting up straighter, his amusement turning to something sharper. "I see," he said slowly. "And what piece did you have in mind?" "Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, the first movement." Someone gasped. Several people started whispering. Even for the advanced students in this room, the Rachmaninoff Third was legendary. It was considered one of the most difficult pieces in the entire piano repertoire. Professional concert pianists spent years preparing it. Some never attempted it at all. The technical demands were insane. The hand stretches required fingers that could span nearly 2 octaves. The speed of the runs could make your hands cramp. And the memory needed to play the entire thing without sheet music was extraordinary. For a blind 15-year-old girl to claim she could play it was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Victor laughed, not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh that echoed through the concert hall. "Young lady," he said, still chuckling, "do you even understand what you're suggesting? That piece is beyond most professional pianists. It requires extensive preparation, exceptional technical skill, and years of experience. I've been playing piano for 40 years, and even I approach that concerto with extreme caution. I understand what I'm suggesting, sir, Lily said quietly, and I'm prepared to play it. This is absurd, Victor said, his amusement fading into something like annoyance. You can't possibly have that piece memorized. It's over 30 minutes long. Even if you did, you couldn't execute it properly without being able to see the keyboard. The hand positions alone require visual precision. Then let me try, Lily said. And now there was an edge to her voice. If I fail, you'll have been proven right. But if I succeed, then perhaps you'll reconsider your assumptions about what blind pianists can do. Victor stood up. Lily heard his footsteps as he walked closer to the stage. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. This master class is for serious students who wish to learn, not for people who want to make spectacles of themselves. I assigned you an appropriate piece for your skill level. The arrogance to assume you can play Rachmaninoff when you struggled, to find your way to the stage is frankly offensive to every pianist who has spent decades mastering their craft. I didn't struggle to find my way, Lily said, her voice shaking now, but not from fear, from anger. I walked carefully because I can't see. That doesn't mean I can't play piano, and I'm not trying to make a spectacle. I'm trying to show you that you judged me without ever hearing me play. Before Victor could respond, another voice spoke up. It was Chen, standing from her seat in the audience. Mr. Ashford, I think we'd all like to hear her play. Another student stood, then another. Within seconds, at least 15 students were on their feet. Not all of them, but enough to make a statement. This is highly irregular, Victor said, his voice tight with frustration. So is assigning a serious piano student a children's song without hearing her play first, said an older boy from Belgium, who Lily recognized by his voice. Let her play. What's the harm? If she can't do it, it'll take 30 seconds to become obvious. But if she can, then we all get to witness something remarkable. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Lily stood perfectly still, her heart hammering so hard she felt dizzy. Everything hinged on this moment. If he said no, if he sent her back to her seat, she'd have no choice but to accept it. This was his masterclass, his stage, his rules. Fine, Victor finally said, and the word came out like ice. You may attempt it. But when you fail, I expect a public apology for wasting everyone's time. And you will play the piece I assigned you originally, agreed? Agreed, Lily said immediately. Then please, Victor said, his footsteps returning to his seat. Enlighten us. Lily turned and walked toward the piano. Mrs. Hoffman had shown her the exact path that morning during their early arrival, had let her count the steps and memorize the route. Lily reached the bench, set her cane carefully against the side of the piano where she could find it later, and sat down. The Steinway Concert Grand was magnificent. She'd played on one exactly like it during a competition 2 years ago, and her fingers remembered. She adjusted the bench slightly, getting the height just right. Then she lifted her hands and let them hover over the keys for a moment, centering herself. The room was absolutely silent. 30 students, Mrs. Hoffman, Victor Ashford, and a few other faculty members who'd wandered in to watch. All of them waiting. Most of them probably expecting her to crash and burn within the first minute. Lily took one more deep breath. She thought about all the hours she'd spent learning this piece, all the time she'd played it alone in Mrs. Hoffman's studio, in her bedroom, in her mind while lying in bed at night. She thought about the accident that had taken her sight, but had somehow mysteriously made her hearing so much sharper. She thought about every person who'd ever doubted her, every well-meaning relative who'd suggested she try something easier than piano. And then she thought about the music itself. The way Rachmaninoff had poured his whole soul into this concerto, the passion, the longing, the triumph hidden in every phrase. This wasn't just notes on a page. This was human emotion translated into sound. And Lily understood emotion. She'd lived through loss and pain and the daily struggle of navigating a world not built for her. She'd earned the right to play this piece. Her hands descended onto the keys. The opening notes rang out, clear and powerful, not tentative or searching, but confident, definite. The melody line emerged, singing above the complex accompaniment her left hand was providing. And then came the first really difficult section, the one where both hands had to move in opposite directions at incredible speed, while maintaining perfect balance between them. Lily's fingers flew across the keyboard. Her hands crossed and uncrossed, leaping from bass notes to treble and back again. The muscle memory she'd built over thousands of hours of practice took over. She wasn't thinking about individual notes anymore. She was just feeling the music, letting it flow through her body and out through her fingertips. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 2 minutes. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody stopped her. The piece kept building, getting more complex, more demanding, and Lily met every challenge without hesitation. Victor Ashford sat frozen in his seat, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. This wasn't possible. This shouldn't be possible, but it was happening right in front of him. The other students had stopped whispering. Some of them were leaning forward in their seats. Others had tears forming in their eyes. They were watching something extraordinary, and they knew it. Mrs. Hoffman stood in the back, her hand pressed against her mouth, her own eyes wet. She'd heard Lily play this piece dozens of times, but never like this. Never with this much fire, this much emotion. Every ounce of yesterday's humiliation was pouring out through Lily's fingers, transforming into something beautiful and powerful and absolutely undeniable. The first movement of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto was roughly 17 minutes long. Lily played every single second of it, never missing a note, never hesitating, never showing even a flicker of uncertainty. And Victor Ashford, the great pianist who had dismissed her so completely just 24 hours earlier, could do nothing but listen. The music poured out of the piano like water from a broken dam. Lily's entire body moved with the piece, swaying slightly as the melody rose and fell. Her face showed everything she was feeling: pain in the minor chords, joy in the major ones, determination in the thundering bass notes, hope in the delicate high passages. Around the 7th minute mark, there was a section that separated amateur pianists from professionals. It required both hands to play rapid runs in opposite directions, while maintaining completely different rhythms. Most pianists had to slow down here, even just a little. Their hands would get tangled. Their timing would slip. But Lily's hands remained perfectly synchronized, each finger hitting exactly the right key at exactly the right moment with exactly the right pressure. A girl in the 3rd row started crying quietly. She was a piano student herself, had been playing for 12 years, and she understood just how impossible what she was watching actually was. The technical difficulty was one thing, but the emotional depth Lily was bringing to the piece was something else entirely. This wasn't just a performance. It was a revelation. Victor sat motionless. His face had gone through several transformations over the past 10 minutes. First shock, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like pain, because he was beginning to understand what he'd done, who he'd dismissed, what assumptions he'd made, and perhaps most importantly, what those assumptions said about him as a teacher and as a person. The piece moved into its quieter middle section, where the melody became gentle, almost fragile. Lily's touch lightened, her fingers barely seeming to press the keys at all, yet somehow producing sound that filled the entire concert hall. It was the kind of control that took decades to develop, the kind of sensitivity that couldn't be taught, only felt. Mrs. Hoffman watched her student with a mix of pride and something close to grief. She'd kept Lily hidden for so long, protecting her from exactly this kind of judgment, this kind of prejudice. But watching her now, seeing the raw power and beauty of her playing, Mrs. Hoffman realized that maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe the world needed to see what Lily could do. Maybe hiding her gift had been its own form of injustice. The music began to build again, climbing toward the first movement's dramatic conclusion. The left hand started pounding out massive chords while the right hand danced impossibly fast, runs up and down the keyboard. Lily's arms moved in a blur. Sweat began to form on her forehead. Her breathing deepened. The physical demands of the piece were enormous, and she'd been playing for nearly 15 minutes straight without a break. But she didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Didn't miss a single note. A few more students were crying now. Even some who'd never particularly cared about classical music found themselves overwhelmed by what they were witnessing. Because this wasn't really about piano anymore. This was about someone who'd been told she couldn't do something, who'd been looked down on and dismissed, proving beyond any shadow of doubt that she belonged on that stage. The final minute approached. The piece built to its climax, every element coming together in a massive wall of sound. Lily's whole body was involved now. Her shoulders, her back, even her feet on the pedals working in perfect coordination. The Steinway sang under her hands, its rich tone filling every corner of the hall. And then came the final phrase, A cascading run down the entire length of the keyboard followed by 3 powerful chords. Lily's hands came down for the last time, holding the final chord, letting it ring out until the very last vibration faded into silence. She lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her face was flushed. A single drop of sweat rolled down her temple. She sat perfectly still, exactly as she'd been taught, waiting for the audience's response. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. And then the room exploded. Every single person leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening, echoing off the gold walls and crystal chandeliers like thunder. Students were shouting, crying, clapping so hard their hands had to hurt. Some were hugging each other. Others were just standing there with their hands over their mouths in shock. Chen was sobbing openly, her face buried in her hands. The boy from Belgium who'd stood up for Lily earlier was clapping above his head, a huge grin on his face. Even the faculty members who'd wandered in to watch were on their feet, applauding with genuine amazement. Lily sat at the piano, listening to the roar of approval, and for a moment she couldn't quite process it. She'd been so focused on the music, so deep inside the performance, that returning to reality felt almost jarring. But as the applause continued, wave after wave of it washing over her, she felt tears begin to slip down her cheeks behind her dark glasses. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Mrs. Hoffman was already moving toward the stage, tears streaming down her wrinkled face, her hands shaking with emotion. But before she could reach Lily, someone else got there first. Victor Ashford had stood up from his seat. He walked slowly toward the stage, and the applause began to quiet as people noticed him moving. By the time he climbed the stairs and walked to the piano, the room had fallen almost silent again, everyone watching to see what would happen next. Lily heard his footsteps approaching. Her body tensed. She'd done what she'd set out to do, had proven her point beyond any doubt, but she had no idea how he would react. Would he be angry? Defensive? Would he try to minimize what she'd just accomplished? Victor stopped a few feet from the piano bench. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion, shaking in a way that made it clear he was barely holding himself together. "Stand up," he said quietly. Lily hesitated for just a second, then stood turning to face where his voice had come from. And then Victor Ashford, one of the most celebrated pianists in the world, did something no one in that room expected. He knelt down. He actually knelt on the stage floor in front of this 15-year-old blind girl, his expensive suit pants touching the polished wood, and he looked up at her with tears running freely down his face. "I am so sorry," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I am so deeply, profoundly sorry. I judged you without hearing you. I dismissed your ability without giving you a chance. I let my own narrow views about what a pianist should be blind me to what you actually are." The room was dead silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. "What I just witnessed," Victor continued, still on his knees, "was some of the most extraordinary piano playing I have ever heard, and I have heard the greatest pianists of our generation. Your technical mastery is flawless. Your emotional depth is remarkable. But more than that, you have something that cannot be taught. You have a connection to the music that goes beyond sight, beyond technique, beyond everything I thought I knew about piano." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, not caring that everyone was watching him cry. "I have been playing piano for 42 years. I have performed in the greatest concert halls in the world. I have won every award my field offers. And in all that time I have never been as moved by a performance as I was by yours just now." Victor slowly stood back up. He took Lily's hand in both of his, holding it gently. "You are not just a good pianist," he said. "You are not just a talented pianist. You are one of the most gifted pianists I have ever encountered. And the fact that you can do what you do without sight doesn't make you less than other pianists. It makes what you do even more miraculous." Lily couldn't speak. The tears were flowing freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. All the hurt from yesterday, all the years of people doubting her, all the times she'd wondered if maybe they were right, if maybe she should just give up and try something easier, all of it was washing away in this moment. "Will you forgive me?" Victor asked, and he sounded like a child asking for forgiveness, vulnerable and genuine. Lily nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Victor turned to face the audience, still holding Lily's hand. Everyone in this room just witnessed something extraordinary, he announced, his voice getting stronger. And I want you all to remember this moment. Remember that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Remember that our assumptions about what people can or cannot do are often completely wrong. And remember that sometimes the greatest artists are the ones we almost overlook. He looked back at Lily. Thank you for teaching me that lesson. I needed to learn it. The applause started again, even louder than before. And this time, Victor Ashford joined in, clapping for Lily Way with genuine respect and admiration. Mrs. Hoffman finally made it to the stage. She wrapped Lily in a tight hug, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. Around them, students were crowding forward, wanting to congratulate Lily, to shake her hand, to tell her how incredible she'd been. But in all the chaos and celebration, Lily felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the blind girl who played piano. She was a pianist who happened to be blind, and that difference, small as it might sound, changed everything. The rest of that day passed in a blur. After the performance, Victor canceled the remainder of the masterclass. He said that nothing anyone else played could possibly follow what they'd just witnessed, and he was right. Instead, he spent an hour talking with Lily and Mrs. Hoffman in a small room behind the stage. He asked Lily about her training, her techniques, how she memorized such complex pieces. He wanted to know everything, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no condescension in his voice, no doubt. Just genuine curiosity and respect. I have a proposal, Victor said after they'd talked for a while. I'd like to recommend you for the International Young Artists Competition in Berlin next spring. It's one of the most prestigious competitions for pianists under 18. Winners often get contracts with major orchestras and recording labels. Lily's heart jumped. She'd heard of that competition. Every serious piano student had. But the entry requirements were strict, and you needed a recommendation from a recognized professional to even audition. The competition is fierce, Victor continued. You'll be up against incredibly talented pianists from around the world. But after what I heard today, I believe you have a real chance of winning. More than a chance, actually. I think you could dominate it. Mrs. Hoffman squeezed Lily's hand. They both knew this was a huge opportunity, the kind that could launch a real career. I'd be honored, Lily said softly. There's more, Victor added. I'd like to work with you personally over the next few months, help you prepare. I'm not saying this to be charitable or to make up for yesterday. I'm saying it because working with a talent like yours would be a privilege for me. Lily felt tears threatening again. Yesterday, this man had dismissed her completely. Today, he was offering to mentor her. The transformation was almost too much to process. Yes, she said. Yes, I'd love that. That evening, Chen and several other students took Lily out for dinner at a small restaurant near the concert hall. They laughed and talked for hours, sharing stories about their worst performances and their dreams for the future. For the first time, Lily felt like she was part of a community. Not the blind girl on the outside looking in, but just another pianist among pianists. When she finally got back to the hotel room, exhausted and happy, she called her parents. Her mother answered on the first ring. Lily, how did it go? We've been waiting to hear from you all day. Lily told them everything. About Victor's initial dismissal, about the standing ovation, about his apology and his offer to mentor her. Her mother started crying halfway through the story. Her father got on the phone too, his voice thick with pride. We always knew you were special, her father said. But I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, for demanding to be heard. After they hung up, Lily lay in bed listening to the sounds of Vienna outside her window. Car horns, distant music from a bar, people laughing on the street. She thought about how different this night felt from the previous one, when she'd cried herself to sleep feeling worthless and defeated. The next morning, as Lily and Mrs. Hoffman prepared to leave Vienna and return home to Salzburg, something unexpected happened. Victor met them at the train station with a small group of journalists and photographers. He'd arranged for an interview about Lily's performance, and suddenly she was being asked questions about her training, her blindness, her future plans. How does it feel to be called a prodigy? One journalist asked. Lily thought carefully before answering. I don't think of myself as a prodigy. I think of myself as someone who works really hard at something I love. The blindness just means I had to find different ways to do it. The story spread quickly. Within days, video clips of Lily's performance were circulating online. Classical music blogs were writing about her. People were calling her inspiring, remarkable, extraordinary. Some of the attention made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to be famous for being blind. She wanted to be respected for being a good pianist. But Mrs. Hoffman helped her navigate it all. Let them be inspired, the old teacher said. If your story helps even one person believe they can overcome their own obstacles, isn't that worth something? Over the following months, Victor kept his promise. He traveled to Salzburg twice a month to work with Lily, and they also had weekly video sessions where he'd listen to her play and offer feedback. He was a demanding teacher, but never cruel. He pushed her to dig deeper into the emotional content of pieces, to take risks with her interpretations, to trust her own artistic instincts. You have perfect technique, he told her one day. Now you need to decide what you want to say with it. The greatest musicians aren't just skilled. They have something to communicate. What do you want to tell the world through your music? Lily thought about this for a long time. Finally, she realized what her answer was. I want to tell people that limitations are often just illusions, that what we think is impossible might just be difficult, and that beauty can come from unexpected places. Victor smiled. Then play with that in mind. Let every note carry that message. When spring came, Lily traveled to Berlin for the International Young Artists Competition. 48 pianists had been selected to compete, coming from 23 different countries. The competition lasted 3 days with preliminary rounds, semifinals, and finals. Each round eliminated more pianists until only 3 remained. Lily made it through the preliminaries easily. Her semifinal performance of Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata earned her the highest scores of any competitor. And then came the finals, where each of the 3 remaining pianists would perform a complete concerto with a professional orchestra. Lily chose Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, the same piece she'd played for Victor 7 months earlier. But this time she'd be playing it with full orchestral accompaniment in front of 1,200 people and 5 of the world's most respected piano judges. The night before her final performance, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in her hotel room running through the piece in her mind, her fingers twitching slightly under the covers. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The accident that took her sight. The years of practice, Victor's initial dismissal and his transformation. All of it had brought her here. The next evening, she walked onto the stage of the Berlin Philharmonic Hall. The orchestra was already seated, 60 musicians waiting for her. The conductor, a kind woman named Helena who'd rehearsed with Lily that morning, smiled at her from the podium. Lily sat at the piano. She felt the familiar weight of the keys under her fingers, heard the audience settling into their seats, felt the lights warm on her face, and she thought about what Victor had asked her months ago. What do you want to tell the world? She wanted to tell them that darkness doesn't mean the end of light, that losing something doesn't mean losing everything, that the human spirit can adapt and overcome and create beauty, even when circumstances seem impossible. The conductor raised her baton. The orchestra began the opening bars, and then Lily joined them, her fingers dancing across the keys, telling her story without words. She played like she'd never played before. Every emotion she'd ever felt poured into the music. The fear and pain of losing her sight, the frustration of being underestimated, the joy of discovering that she could still do what she loved, the triumph of proving everyone wrong. It was all there in the notes, in the phrases, in the spaces between the sounds. When the final chord rang out, the audience erupted. The standing ovation lasted for 8 minutes. People were throwing flowers onto the stage. The orchestra musicians were tapping their bows against their music stands in approval. The judges were all on their feet. Lily won first place, unanimously, but more importantly, she won something else: respect, recognition, the right to be seen as what she truly was. Not a blind girl who played piano, but a world-class pianist who happened to be blind. The prizes that came with winning were substantial. Recording contracts, performance opportunities at major venues around the world, scholarship offers from prestigious music schools. Her calendar filled up with concerts for the next 2 years. But Lily never forgot where she came from. Every time she gave a concert, she insisted that part of the proceeds go to music education programs for disabled students. She gave master classes of her own, making sure to listen carefully to every student regardless of their background or apparent limitations. And she always remembered to look for the quiet ones, the ones sitting in the back, the ones who might be hiding extraordinary gifts behind expected assumptions. 5 years after that day in Vienna, Lily performed at Carnegie Hall in New York. Victor was in the audience, now retired from performing himself. During the standing ovation, he stood with tears in his eyes, thinking about how close he'd come to crushing one of the greatest talents he'd ever encountered. After the concert, reporters asked Lily what advice she had for young musicians facing obstacles. She thought for a moment, then smiled. Don't let anyone else define what you're capable of. Not even experts, not even people you admire. Only you know what you can really do. So when someone tells you something is impossible, take it as a challenge. Prove them wrong, not to change their mind, but to show yourself what you're truly made of. She paused, then added, and remember that sometimes the people who doubt you the most can become your biggest supporters. People can change. People can learn. Give them that chance. Lily went on to have a remarkable career. She recorded 15 albums, performed in 37 countries, won multiple awards. But she always said that her most important performance was the one in Vienna, when she was 15 years old, playing for an audience of 30 students and one famous pianist who thought she couldn't do it. That was the day she stopped being defined by what she couldn't do and started being celebrated for what she could. That was the day a blind girl stepped onto a stage and showed the world that true vision comes from the heart, not the eyes. And that was the day everyone in that concert hall learned a lesson they would never forget. That greatness doesn't come from perfect circumstances or unlimited advantages. It comes from passion, dedication, and the courage to demand that the world see you as you truly are. Lily Way had that courage, and because she did, the world became a richer place for everyone who ever heard her play.